All right. Well, as you might expect, reactions have been mixed from Kentucky politicians who represent the state in Washington after President Trump took military action in Venezuela.
Today, we gathered comments from Kentucky's federal delegation and met with Congressman Morgan McGarvey as new information continues to come out about the U.S. invasion.
It was early Saturday morning when elite U.S. military forces hit multiple targets in the Venezuelan capital of Caracas. They captured Nicolas Maduro and his wife, widely considered to be a dictator by the international community, and brought them to the U.S. to face drug and weapons charges. Monday, they were seen transferred to court, as seen in this new video. The two entering not guilty pleas, the ousted leader telling a judge that he's still the president of Venezuela. President Trump has said that the U.S. will now run Venezuela, and American oil companies will operate the country's oil reserves.
We're dealing with the people. We're dealing with the people that just got sworn in. And don't ask me who's in charge, because I'll give you an answer and it'll be very controversial. What does that mean? Because we're in charge.
Those comments getting the attention of Kentucky's politicians.
I think part of the reason you see Congress so upset about this is because in December, Secretary Hegseth, Secretary Rubio, they came in front of Congress and they were asked directly, is this about regime change? Is this about oil? They said no. We now know they lied.
Congressman Morgan McGarvey says Congress was shocked they weren't notified, finding out like the rest of us when news reports were released.
I can tell you I learned about it when I got the news alert on my phone, and my phone started buzzing in kind of the early morning hours Saturday morning, and you're looking at it and you're going, oh, what the hell? I mean, did the president just invade Venezuela without talking to Congress?
Republicans Mitch McConnell and Andy Barr supporting the president's actions. McConnell writes on X in part, quote, Maduro is a thug, and the hemisphere would be safer without the lackey of Iran, Russia, and China in power. Barr writes in part, quote, Americans everywhere should celebrate that President Trump has restored international order and further deterred our enemies. Around the world, similar division. Thousands took to the streets in Venezuela to celebrate, talking about relief and joy. Others in American cities came out in protest.
Republican Thomas Massie, who has criticized the president heavily over the past year, says he condemns the actions taken. Today, we also asked Congressman McGarvey about a New York Times report that Delta Force commandos rehearsed the mission at Fort Campbell in Kentucky. McGarvey said he couldn't confirm that, but heads back to Washington tomorrow with, quote, a lot of questions.